And for the first question, we'll begin with Ms. Coop. This is a little bit of a two-part question, but definitely related topics. So, first of all, why do you want to represent District 102 in the state legislature? Specifically, since neither of you has served previously in the Texas legislature, where you will be asked to vote on a wide range of issues affecting your constituents, how does your past experience prepare you for this position?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you also to the League of Women Voters and to the RISD Council of PTAs for putting this on. It's greatly appreciated. I am from Dallas. I've lived all my life in Dallas, and I have served on the Dallas City Council for the past 8 years. I was term limited about a year ago, and a lot of the Dallas portion of this district was actually in my Dallas City Council district. So the district is Addison, Far North Dallas, and Richardson. Why do I want to serve? I want to serve, I consider myself a servant leader. I believe strongly in service to your community. I've had an opportunity to serve my community. I think that I have a unique ability in this situation because our kids graduated from RISD schools. I attended and graduated with my master's degree at UTD, which is also in the district. And during the summers, our kids picked up college credits at Richland College, which is also in the district. It's an education district, and I think I have a pretty good pulse on the district as far as those kinds of issues that will be coming up in the state legislature in education, and that will be my one of my primary focuses.
All right, thank you. Mr. Clayton.
Thank you very much. My name is George Clayton. I just retired from education after 15 years in the Dallas Independent School District. So I have some idea of what education is in this area and certainly in Texas, as I also have served as a member of the Texas State Board of Education. In the time that I was at the Dallas Independent School District, I taught remedial reading to 19-year-old students who could not read and worried greatly about the fact that they probably were going to try to go off to college and still not be able to read at a college level. That wouldn't be too unusual in many of our schools in this area. In the time I was on the State Board of Education, which was District 12, I represented everyone in this room because all of District 102 is in District 12. I made every effort when I was on the State Board to be a vocal supporter of teachers and students and education in the state of Texas, and that is going to be the thrust of my campaign, education in Texas. 30 seconds remain, thank you. Education in Texas, with the emphasis on this, with less emphasis on testing as a summative tool in our schools. We can have standardized testing, but I think it should be diagnostic and not summative, and put more emphasis on teachers in the classroom.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clayton. For our second question, Mr. Clayton, you will answer this question first. Texas' refusal to expand Medicaid means that thousands of low-income people from around the Metroplex still seek out basic medical care in the Parkland emergency room. Dallas County taxpayers are footing the bill for this inappropriate, expensive care. Do you support this situation?
Do I support Medicaid not being funded? Is that the question?
I think Texas' refusal to expand Medicaid.
I do not support that. Now, a few years ago I might have, but let me tell you from personal experience, I'm not on Medicaid. I don't qualify for Medicaid. But at the end of May, I had to go into the hospital for 3 days at Medical City. I came out of the hospital with a bill of $109,000. $109,000. Now, luckily, I was insured at the time, and my final bill was only $3,300, the part I paid. But can you imagine being a Medicaid recipient or qualify for Medicaid and having a bill for $109,000 or having a bill for $9,000? What are you going to do? You're going to go to Parkland, which is often overwhelmed with patients. So I do not support the lack of funding for Medicaid. I think everyone is entitled to at least a minimum of health care procedures in the state of Texas. It's a shame that the state of Texas, which is one of the wealthiest states in the Union, cannot provide that service for its citizens.
All right, Ms. Coop.
Right. Well, I oppose the expansion of Medicaid, but I would like to see the federal government give us back our money in the form of block grants. The reason I don't like Medicaid is because it's fraught with all sorts of bureaucratic issues. I think giving Texas block grant medical money from medicine would be a better way to do it. I think we in Texas know what we need for our for the medical needs of the community. Parkland Hospital, I don't know if you've been by there lately. They're going to open fairly soon. It's an absolutely enormous building. I got my bill the other day for our property taxes, and it was higher than the community college district bill. One of the issues there at Parkland Hospital is that there are communities that are not in Dallas County that are sending their indigent care patients to Parkland Hospital, and that is falling on a burden for the payers of Dallas County taxes. So I would like to get the money back from the federal government in the form of block grants.
All right, thank you, Ms. Coop. Ms. Coop, this next question you'll answer first, and it's related to the oil and gas industry. Do you think the state is doing enough to regulate the oil and gas industry, especially with regard to the practice of fracking?
I was on the Dallas City Council that passed a fracking ordinance and a distance ordinance is probably a better way to put it, from homes for fracking. Okay, so we were one of the first ones that did that. I was right on the tail end of that. It came right after I left office, but the ramp up to it and all the meetings to it were held while I was in office. So I think it is a local control issue. I think that you cannot have the state or the federal government dictate to those local folks in local government where what kind of ordinances that you should put in place for the oil and gas industry. In West Texas, it's different than an urban city like Dallas. And so I support the oil and gas industry, but I also am a huge supporter of local control, as I was on the city council.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton.
Well, just as I support independent school districts calling the shot in the schools locally, I agree with Linda that the local authorities, the city councils, mayors, and so forth, should control the oil and gas industry activities in their area. So the question is, do I think the state is doing enough? The answer is probably yes to that, because I believe that the local control would be much better than the state interfering with it.
All right, thank you. This next question deals with transportation, and Mr. Clayton, you'll answer this question first. What is your position on connecting the Richardson-Plano area with DFW and Fort Worth via the DART station located at 190 and 75?
I would agree with it. With the number of people in this area and the number of people growing and the number of people using the airport, it makes for easy and quick transportation to the airport. I'm getting ready to take a trip myself, and I'm going to drive to the airport and park my car. If there was that kind of transportation, I wouldn't do that, but I do support that.
All right, Ms. Coop.
Right. So the line that they're talking about is the Cotton Belt line. I support an east-west transit route. They're discussing various ways to do that now, but I've always, since the beginning of the race, a year and a half ago, I've always said that it should be done in conjunction with the folks that live along the line and the cities that are involved. And I think that there can be a solution to this issue.
Thank you. This next question deals with taxes. Ms. Coop, you will answer this question first. In recent years, there has been a lot of emphasis on keeping state taxes low. How do you think this emphasis has affected the day-to-day lives of low and moderate income Texans?
You know, I have a little bit different take on how we would do either how would we reform the budget, because I've been through budget reformation with the city, and the city has a $3 billion budget. And I think it has more to do with the budget than it does with taxes. And the way that we did it in the city about 8 or 9 years ago is that we decided that we would break our budget down completely and rebuild the budget. And in that, we found that We got rid of a lot of programs that were older programs. We've revamped a lot of programs. But the main thing that we found was we kind of went back to what should a city be doing? What should the purpose of city government be? And I think that if we went back and used that methodology, it's called budgeting for outcomes, and there's others as well, that we would probably be able to find that we would be able to help and have a safety net, of course, for those who are poor.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton?
Well, the question was, if I heard it correctly, what is my opinion of the current tax structure as it affects low-income households who are subject to pay the same taxes as a high-income household? The sales tax would be the same for everyone. If the purpose of the question is to try to draw out of me whether or not low-income households should be exempt from taxation, I would say no. I don't think they should be. I think maybe that's where you're going with this question. On the other hand, there's a great deal of help in the state of Texas for low-income folks. All they have to do is apply for it. I came out of DISD where virtually, I guess I came in contact with 35,000 students in the time I was there, and almost every one of them was on free lunch and free breakfast programs. All of that is paid for through your tax dollars, either federal or state or a combination of both. So in terms of tax structure in the state of Texas, the fact that we don't have an income tax, the fact that it is prohibited by the Constitution of this state, I think is wonderful, and we should certainly leave that alone.
Thank you. This next question deals with public health. Mr. Clayton, you'll answer this question first. Natural disasters and the current Ebola scare have highlighted the role of state government in emergency response and public health. Do you think the current level of state funding in these areas is sufficient to protect Texas citizens? Why or why not?
Well, given the current situation, I would say we probably definitely need to take a look at it. As you know, Mr. Duncan died early this morning over at Presbyterian. I don't think maybe the health structure in Texas had anything to do with that, but there were some flaws in his care as he was sent home and turned away from the hospital and then taken back. That has caused a great deal of nervousness in this area and throughout the country. So I think it's worthwhile if we have to have a commission from the governor's office or legislative or a combination of both to take a look at the healthcare system, especially in terms of preparedness for these kinds of emergencies. It appears to me that the local officials and the state officials and the federal officials have been knocked off center just a little bit by this. So I think it's enough blame to go around, but I don't think it's a situation where it can't be fixed. I think it can be fixed, but we need to look into it, and we need to have a study and new rules and regulations, and perhaps someone to be absolutely at the top of this in charge of it.
Thank you. Ms. Coop?
Yeah, I think the governor has formed a commission, and that's probably the right thing to do. Having been on the city council when Katrina hit, these types of disasters or even a medical emergency like the Ebola scare is today require lots of coordination between different agencies. And I agree with Mr. Clayton. I don't think that we were entirely prepared, and I think that we could be prepared better. And I think that we will learn a lot from this experience. And I look forward to seeing how the Governor's Commission works and how they do come up with a more coordinated effort between the federal government, this state, and the local officials, whether it be the county or the city.
Thank you. Ms. Coop, you'll answer this next question first. Do you support the current method of redistricting used in Texas? If not, what method would you like to see instead?
I don't know. You know, I know a lot about redistricting at the city council level, okay? And I know that it was broken, and we're fixing it with the charter amendments. As a matter of fact, that some of you that live in Dallas will have on their ballot, at the end of the ballot, be sure you go through all through 12 pages of it, you'll find the charter amendments at the end of the ballot. But as far as the state goes, I don't know that I know enough about the redistricting process to give you some suggestions as to how it could be fixed. I know that I don't think that it doesn't work as well as it should. I think we would probably all agree on that, but I don't know that I have enough knowledge about how to fix that.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton?
Well, I do. As you may recall, early in my comments, I said I'm a former member of the State Board of Education, and one of the main reasons I'm still not there is because of redistricting. I learned a great deal about it. When I ran for State Board and won the election, and District 12 covered parts of North Dallas County and all of Rockwall County. And I did really well, and I won, and I went down to serve the people of the district, and then all of a sudden redistricting came up, and I've never seen such a mess in Austin, Texas, and deals being made. I bet if I looked at one, I looked at 15 different maps of just State Board of Education District 12. And the variations in the maps might be no more than 1 or 2 precincts, but those 1 or 2 precincts would determine, by and large, whether it was going to be a Republican district or a Democratic district. And that wasn't just true of SBOE districts, which are the largest elected districts in the state. It was true the kind of designs I would see on these maps of House and Senate districts as well. And everybody jockeying for position to get that district just the way they want it. Districting should either be done blindly by computer, or it should be done blindly by committees who have no gain whatsoever. It should not be done by sitting members of the legislature who have a great deal to gain by rigging the district in their favor. I know.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. All right, this next question again deals with transportation. Mr. Clayton, you will answer this question first. The state significantly underfunds transportation spending for repairs and new roads, which has resulted in the use of toll roads. Do you support the use of toll roads? If not, where should the money for expanded transportation needs come from?
Well, do I support the use of toll road? If the thing's been built, then I certainly support the use of it. But I'm not so much in support of building more and more toll roads as an answer to the transportation and road issue in Texas. There's not anyone in this room who hasn't been out around Dallas early in the morning or certainly in the evening with going home traffic. The same is true in Houston, Austin, El Paso, San Antonio, all of our urban areas, certainly in central Texas around Round Rock in that area. Have you ever driven to Austin at about 4 in the afternoon and gotten to Round Rock and wasn't sure you were going to make it to Austin, Texas or not? And it was very close by, but it took you another 2 hours to get there. This is the kind of issue that we're going to face. And let me tell you something. It has to be a long-term project. And while there may be some money around in Austin, Texas to do a quick fix over a biennium perhaps, or maybe 2 legislative sessions, in the long run, we are going to have to pay for more roads in this state because our population in these urban areas are growing. People are coming from all over the country into this state, and one way or another, it's going to cost us, and we might as well realize that. And I know a lot of people out here are going, oh, that means more taxes. It's going to mean more money from whatever source, and eventually it means coming out of your pocket.
Thank you. Ms. Coop?
Okay, so here's what's kind of going on in transportation. Right now, we need about $5 billion a year for transportation that we do not have. Now, you'll have a ballot referendum on this on November 4th on your ballot. And if you pass, it will help transportation, but that will just be a small part of it, actually. And there needs to be other resources put towards transportation. My plan is to take the existing sales tax from new vehicles, not any new taxes, but the existing ones, and put that towards transportation. And the reason that I say that is because there's a good nexus there between sales tax for motor vehicles and roadways. The use of the toll roads or managed lanes is what you see on LBJ, where there's a couple of lanes in the middle of free lanes that are actually tolled, has been used because there has been no money, extra money for transportation, and a lot of the money that is for transportation that was supposed to go towards roadway maintenance has absolutely just disappeared. So we have underfunded our maintenance. By the way, by using the toll techniques that we're using, we're doing off-book taxing. I would call it off-book taxing. I don't agree with that. I think we need to get back to conventional financing of roadways.
Thank you. This next question is a public education question, and Ms. Coop, you'll answer this first. 2 questions. First, do you support increased state funding for public education? And if I might, encourage you to comment about some of the structural challenges about funding that, given the lawsuit that's going on and the current system having been found unconstitutional. That's the first part. And the second one is kind of an easier question to answer. Do you support enforcing the current 22-to-1 ratio of students to teachers in the lower grades?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Ms. Coop.
Well, as we all know, because I think I see a lot of education advocates in here, we really won't know about education finance until the judge rules completely. And so we'll have to take a look at that and understand. He's come out with some preliminary discussions on it as far as it being a statewide kind of property tax. And so we're really going to have to address that, but we need to wait just a little bit on that. I do support putting more money into education of those districts that are doing a terrific job, like RISD. I've been very firm in this. If you're doing a great job teaching kids, and no matter what the circumstances of the children, then you deserve to have, especially if you're a donor ISD, which RISD is, you deserve to have some of that money back, because in RISD you're educating a population that is very similar to some of the population in South Dallas. I know it was in my council district, and in RISD it's the Spring Valley Coit area. So I think there's some structural things there that we can't answer today because the judge is going to have to rule on that. My understanding is there may be a special session on educational finance, and we'll see at the end of the session how that works out.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton?
Well, you probably can guess what I'm going to say about this. I certainly do support more money for education. The money in education now is inadequate. Now, there is also some colossal waste of money in education. Let me give you an example. In the Dallas Independent School District, all of the schools, and I'm familiar with high schools because I spent 15 years in high schools, purchase enough books for every student in the school to have a book. So if you're in Thomas Jefferson High School with 1,500 students, there are enough literature books, 10th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade, Algebra 1, Algebra 2. All of the students are entitled to a book. The state requires the district to make sure that a student has a book. The only number of books used in the districts, in that district, are 30 per class. Students do not get a book. So for the whole period of the adoption of a set of books, they sit in the book room for 8 or 9 or 10 years. Another adoption process comes along from the State Board of Education. A proclamation is issued. The district goes out and spends millions of dollars on books and store them in the book rooms because students are not issued books anymore. So we need to look at the colossal waste. We need to move toward technology. Books that are 1,500 pages long are a throwback to the past. We don't need them. They're not being used. So there's a great deal of savings in the millions, the multiple millions of dollars just right there that we could use. She said, stop. No.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton.
That's what my students used to tell me. No.
This next question is related to water, and Mr. Clayton, you'll answer this first. The cities of the North Texas Municipal Water District are experiencing a huge growth in population. What changes in state water policy do you support to help expand the supply of water to these cities? Do you support state-level water conservation mandates?
Well, in certain times, I would certainly support conservation mandates, but let me say something to you if you've done any reading on this. The issue is a good deal more serious than we realize. The drought that we're going through, especially in West Texas, actually extends all the way through the western part of the United States. Just a few days ago, in reading an article, I read that in the time that the drought hit, especially from West Texas, all of West Texas toward California, the country has lost 82 trillion gallons of water that it would normally have in a non-drought period. Now, to put this in perspective, if all of the water on Earth fit into a 5-gallon container, a 5-gallon bottle of water, all the fresh water on Earth would just be a teaspoonful of all of that water, and Texas would have a fraction of that. Well, and we are in a drought. And unless the good Lord comes along and helps us a little bit, that little bit of fraction of that teaspoon is going to dry out, and that's what's happening. The water in the West Texas aquifers is drying up, in the St. Edwards aquifer down around Austin is drying up. And most of our water is used for irrigation purposes, about 50% in the state of Texas. So we need to do some long-range planning because we can't depend on the monsoons to be here when we want them. We can't snap our fingers and say, okay, rain today. It just doesn't happen like that. And Texas is growing by leaps and bounds. We need more water. So a long term, and I'll tell you something else, it's going to cost you some money, but it's time to look at desalination. I think San Antonio's looking at that. I lived in the city of Tampa. They already are online with their first desalination plant, so we need to look at these. I see the red sign. I had to finish my sentence. I'm sorry, Linda.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Coop?
Right. Okay, so we have two water districts in this House District 102. We have the North Texas Municipal Water District, and we have the Dallas Water Utilities. Dallas Water Utilities services about 29 cities, and the North Texas Municipal Water District services about 19 cities. The question was, do you believe that we should have state-mandated conservation? I think we should leave that up to the local control. I think the water districts with their citizens, need to decide on that, because you'll have much more buy-in there. When I was on the city council, we put a conservation policy into place, 5% over and above every single year, 5% over and above the previous year. So we believe very strongly in water conservation. What I would change down at the State House is the regulatory agency, which is called TCEQ, and that agency was the agency that it took 8 years to permit the reservoir that currently North Texas Municipal Water District has currently gotten a permit for. Let me tell you, it took 8 years, and they already had the land for the reservoir. There was no opposition to the land. They already had bought the land, and they already had done the engineering studies. And still, it took 8 years to go through the permitting process. I'm elected to office. We are going to change that, because that makes no sense whatsoever. It's going to take now the water district 2 years to build the plant and about 2 years to fill it up. So you're still going to be under very strict water issues for the next several years.
Thank you. Ms. Coop, you'll answer this next question first. Do you support continuing the practice of electing judges in Texas? If so, where do you think voters should look to find enough information to vote responsibly in judicial races at all levels?
You know, in Arizona, they have a bipartisan committee that comes up with the judges, and that probably is a pretty good way to do it. This is a discussion that the legislature will have to have, and with input from the citizens. But if you want some good information, usually the Dallas Bar Association puts out something. You know, you can go online and find information out on the judges. I think the League of Women Voters may be putting out at least the judges' qualifications and things like that. Typically is some of the information that I see. I try to go to the forums to hear what the judges have to say. Actually, I've met a lot of them in a lot of the candidate forums, and it's been a very interesting process for me to understand what their duties are and learn a little bit more about them. But I would encourage you to go to these forums where all the candidates are there, because usually you'll find the judicial candidates there as well. You have an opportunity to talk with them one-on-one. That's the best way. That's the way that I've learned who I want to vote for.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton?
Well, this is close to home because my sister, Teresa Hawthorne, is a judge. She is a judge in the district criminal courts here in Dallas. She was elected 4 years ago. She's running again, unopposed this time, so she will serve another 4 years. She was elected to that bench the same night I was elected to the State Board of Education, so we had sort of a double celebration that night. The thing is this, she is restricted, for example, from contributing to my legislative campaign. She can only give up to $100 because she is a judge. There are many restrictions placed on judges in partisan situations that are not placed on candidates who are running for other offices. In all the time that she ran for judge in that first election, she would go to forums, partisan forums, Democratic forums, Republican forums, everywhere. But the only thing she could really talk about were things that dealt with judicial procedure, and no one in the audience was particularly interested in judicial procedures. But it stymies the candidate and what they have to say, because those are not really, at the time of an election, political offices. Now, once you get into the courthouse, everything is political. But she conducts her court, and I've been down there and watched her, according to what the rules of the court what the rules of the court are and what the law prescribes for her. So I would say it probably would be best to elect our judges in a nonpartisan setting. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. Mr. Clayton, you'll answer this next question first. It's another public education question.
Good.
House Bill 5 reduced the number of state-mandated tests. Would you support a further reduction in state-mandated tests for grades 3 through 8? And if so, how would you propose to continue to hold school districts accountable?
Well, holding school districts and teachers accountable is a derivative of the over-testing procedures to begin with. The local districts, RISD or DISD, wherever it is, should have the responsibility of holding their teachers responsible for their conduct and procedure and professionalism in the classroom. Now, I spent 15 years dealing with TOS, TACS, the current test, the STAR exam, which mushroomed up to 15 exams. And here's what I did. Before I left North Dallas High School to go over to Thomas Jefferson High School, and this has been a couple of years ago, I did a running total of how many tests the teachers were required by the district and the state to give in the course of a year. And they were giving common assessments based on state exams every 2 weeks in core subject areas. Then we had the 15 exams. Then we had midterm exams. We had ACPs, and on and on and on. And per student, total exams taken by student, I came up in the year that school would administer 180,000 exams in that one school because they were giving tests every 2 or 3 days of some kind or another based on state mandate or district mandates. So we are over-testing our students, and we're testing them on their recognition of facts, and we are not testing them on their creativity and use of those facts. So we have some big changes in education in Texas that need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coop?
Right. Well, I do think that it was a good thing that they reduced the number of tests. There's no question about that. I've talked to superintendents, and they've said, let us just deal with the tests that we have right now so that we can see how it goes. One of the problems at the State House is they want to keep changing things. Every biennium, every time they get in there, it seems like they want to change the rules and regulations, and it makes it very difficult for our teachers to teach. It makes it very difficult for our school boards to create policy and our superintendents to follow that out. So I would suggest that they just leave it alone for a little bit, let's see what happens, and return to local control. Those folks that know our kids best, and by the way, we are in this, all of us, for our kids and for their education. And those of us who know best are the local folks. And how the state gets wrapped, into this all the time is just really almost astonishing. So I would suggest this next session that we let it lie for just a little bit and let the local folks take control and see how they're doing. There are terrific things happening in RISD. There's terrific things happening in other ISDs in our area. Let's get the best of the best. Let's learn from that. By the way, RISD has one of the lowest administrative costs of any school district in the state. Somebody come in and take a look at that. Take a look at those positive things that are going on here in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. For this next question, Ms. Coop, you'll answer first. Do you support banning legal abortion for women in Texas?
I'm pro-life. I would have voted for the last bill that came out in the last session.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clayton?
Would I support banning legal abortions? In other words, making abortion illegal in the state of Texas. That's the gist of your question. Not under all circumstances, I would not, but by and large, I would say that I am pro-life. I would hope that the mother and the father and those involved with making that decision would always choose life. I've spent too many years in a school with too many children not to be pro-life. I love those kids, and I enjoyed them, and I can't imagine not having them around. So I'm pro-life.
Thank you. This next question, Mr. Clayton, you'll answer first. Many Texans live in rural areas while the majority live in urban or suburban areas. How will you balance the conflicting needs of Texans from such diverse areas?
Well, when you say rural areas, are you talking about living on the farm or small towns? Is that, or does it matter?
I'd say just assume both of those.
Okay, well, thank you. The needs, well, let's face it, the needs of a concentrated area like Dallas, the Dallas Metroplex, which is what, around 7 million people, Houston around the same number, maybe 9 million. The needs here are going to be greater. The road needs, the school needs, the transportation needs are going to be greater than in small towns. But I think the word we're looking for is what is equity. What would be fine for the small towns that would be the same in the large towns, fair to those people. So I have never lived in a small town. I'm not sure I would even know how to act by living in a small town. I've lived in a large town all my life, but I think it's incumbent upon the government of the state of Texas to equally hear the needs of small communities as well as large communities. So I would never just slam the door in their face. They have to be heard, and whatever needs they have, if they need it, then we are obligated to provide it.
Thank you. Ms. Coop.
This is why we have representative government. So we represent all the people in the state of Texas, whether they live in urban areas or whether they live in rural areas. The demographics are switching. You know, there are more people that live in urban areas now. Yes, they have more needs in urban areas than they do in rural needs. And it's really not that they have more needs, they're just different needs. And the state legislature has representatives from rural areas that fight just as fiercely as those from urban areas, and that's what makes government work. And I trust the system in that. Even in the roadways, when you think, you know, perhaps they don't need as many roadways in a rural area, but they have a greater distance to go. They have less tax base to create those roads. So there's always a balance there, and that's what makes representative government terrific.
Thank you. This next question deals with immigration and border security, and Ms. Coop, you'll answer this question first. First of all, should state troops be protecting the border, and how would you balance business needs for labor against border security?
I think maybe the question that is the National Guard needed at the border? Right. I think that is the crux of the question. I think the reason that the governor sent in the National Guard is because our borders are not secure. And there was no other way to make sure that our borders did become more secure. It is really an issue. As a matter of fact, when I first started walking the district, which was a year and a half ago, and by the way, I've walked 12,000, I myself have knocked on 12,000 doors. Our team has knocked on many more than that, but I myself have knocked on 12,000 doors. The initial response from almost all of the constituents out there was immigration. They were talking about immigration. That switched about 4 months ago when we started getting a flood of children over the border to border security, and that became the #1 issue when I was walking, was border security. It is not only border security as you think of, you know, yes, there are children that are coming in into the country, and they don't even, and a lot of them don't have their parents with them, but it's also border security because there's bad people coming in, and not from some of the, from Mexico and some of the Central American countries. It's a huge issue. We need to really work on border security. We need to solve that issue. And that the federal, and I lay it straight at the federal government's feet because they have refused to address it.
Well, you may remember the lawsuit between Arizona and the federal government dealing with who is in charge of federal borders between Arizona and Mexico, and the federal government won that argument and then proceeded not to do any more about it. So when the governor put the troops on the border, I would say this. I'd much rather the federal government do its job, since it claims that that is its job, and I think rightfully so. But in the face of the fact that that's not being done, then I support those troops being down there. Last year, at mid-year at Thomas Jefferson High School, word got around to me that we would be receiving somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 students from Honduras after the Christmas holiday. And it didn't occur to me at that time that that was part of the influx of the students coming in, or the young people coming in, and that information didn't get to us until after they were here. And sure enough, we had to hire some ELI teachers, English language instruction teachers, for these students from Honduras who could speak no English at all. So where they came from and how they got here, I don't know. But what was amazing to me is that somebody knew they were coming and warned us. And then shortly after that, the influx of thousands of young people came across that border, many of them from the Honduras area, the Latin American area. So I think it's time, if the federal government's not going to do its job, that the states on the border states, are going to have to do what they can.
Thank you. For this next question, Mr. Clayton, you'll answer first. Texas' population is becoming increasingly diverse, and many urban areas are minority-majority. As Anglo-Americans, how do you plan to represent the interests of minority populations in Texas?
Equally. Is there another way to do that? Fairly and equally, without any concern for their ethnic background or their national origin. As I said, I spent 15 years in DISD, and most of the time, and all the time I was there, all of the students, 98% of them, were Hispanic, many of them undocumented. Thomas Jefferson High School has the largest number of undocumented students in the Dallas Independent School District. I treated all of those students as students. I wouldn't treat constituents any differently. My job as a member of the legislature is to represent the need of the people and not be overly concerned about their background.
Thank you. Ms. Coop?
Sure. Well, we represent, no matter what elected position you have, we represent all the people in our district, and we represent all of them fairly and equally. As a Dallas City Council member, I represented one of the poorest areas in Dallas, in the Spring Valley Coit area, and I represented them just as ferociously, with as much enthusiasm as I could with anyone else that was represented in our district. And I think anybody that was living in my council district will tell you that. I worked very hard in that area and other poor areas in my council district, over in the Montfort area, the Anne Frank School area. And I think that we need to do that. And I think that our citizens expect us to do that. They expect us to work for all the citizens. They expect us to work for all the children, regardless of their background, regardless of their ethnicity. And that if you're in public service, you take an oath to do that, and you should uphold that.
Thank you. For this next question, which is a gun question, Ms. Coop, you'll answer first. Do you support guns being allowed on ISD campuses, so elementary and secondary campuses, and college campuses?
You mean by the students?
I'm assuming it means by the staff.
Oh, by
but
the
although
staff.
in college
I don't
there
know.
is, so why don't you just kind of comment on all of the above?
All of the above. I think it should be decided by the locals there. I don't think we're talking about students on elementary campuses or junior high or high school campuses. I can't imagine that we're talking about that. There was a bill passed in the last legislature. It had really to do with rural areas where they didn't have security like we do in our ISDs here that allowed some of the teachers to be trained so that there would be a security person there on campus. And I think that was a good bill that was presented and it was voted upon. Other than that, I think that it should be left up to local control.
Mr. Clayton?
Well, I've known many, many, many teachers in my years in education, and it makes me a little nervous to think about some of them carrying a gun. I have to tell you, given the tenor of students in our urban settings, in the schools, in the Dallas area, especially in the Dallas district. Given the background, the socioeconomic background of many of the students, given their physical size in relation to some of the teachers in that building, I can tell you, you do not want anyone except the appointed officers of the police department assigned to that building to have a gun on that campus. I promise you, it will be a big mistake. Somewhere along the way, in some school, who has allowed teachers or a teacher to have a gun in school, this little English teacher is going to be wrestled to the ground, and that gun's going to be taken away from her, and a catastrophe is going to happen. No, the idea is to keep guns out of schools, not to bring them onto campus as a matter of legality.
Thank you. This next question is an economic development question. Mr. Clayton, you will answer this first.
I'm for it.
Do you think the state legislature should have more control over financial incentives to encourage business development in the state?
More control over financial incentives. Well, of course, the legislature controls the money in the state of Texas, so I suspect that they would certainly have something to say about it. But to an incentive, read that question again to me.
Do you think the state legislature should have more control over financial incentives to encourage business development in the state? And my guess is that this might be directed at perhaps there's been some criticism about the management of the State Enterprise Fund and the lack of transparency and control over that. So,
well, I believe I'm a great believer in free enterprise. That's what built this country, and that certainly has what built the state of Texas. So I would say this: if the legislature, who controls the money and would offer the incentives to businesses to come here, but if there are too many strings attached, often that's a detriment. So I would want to take a look at what the legislature's responsibilities are now in relation to businesses, especially those moving into the state of Texas, like Toyota. I think that's great that we got that. We need more businesses. Dell, unfortunately, is moving part of its operation out to Tennessee because of transportation issues, I might add. So I don't think giving the legislature more control would do it. So I would say no to that answer at this point.
thank you. Ms. Coop?
Well, I think the issue really is the enterprise fund and the lack of oversight for the enterprise fund. I think most people agree that we've got to be competitive in the marketplace for getting huge industries in like Toyota and such. But the problem with the enterprise fund is that some of the businesses that they did bring in, they didn't quantify how many jobs they actually brought in. No one actually went out and looked years later to see how many jobs were actually brought in. Interestingly enough, most cities do have funds like that. The city of Dallas does as well. We very carefully monitor how many jobs were proposed to bring in and then how many jobs were actually brought in. If the proposed amount didn't match the amount that was actually brought in, then there's a penalty. And that was not happening at the state. So I think there needs to be tightening down of those regulations, of those processes that they used.
Thank you, Ms. Coop. This will be our last question for the evening. Ms. Coop, you'll answer this first. If elected, how will you balance your personal convictions with party loyalty if there is a conflict between what you believe is best for your constituents and how your party wants you to vote? And then, secondly, do you anticipate any opposition from special interest groups within your party?
You know, I'll handle it just exactly how I handled the city council. I listen to my constituents. I'm very constituent-based. Most people know that. I'm very close to the people. I spend a lot of time at homeowners meetings, and I like that. I know a lot of elected officials don't particularly care for that part of it, but that's what I do like. I like hearing what the constituents have to say, and if I know them, even if we disagree on an issue, they usually will say, you know what, Linda, I hated what you did there, but I trust you to go down and make a good decision because I know that you're going to study the issue. And so keeping really good communication lines open with our constituents is probably the most important thing. That's what you'll find in me. That's what people will say about my time on the city council, my time as a PTA president, those kinds of things. I listen very carefully, and I really do care about my constituents.
Well, 4 years ago when I ran for State Board of Education and won, I ran as a Republican. And when I was on the board, I used to tell my colleagues on the State Board of Education they should check their politics at the door because we're dealing with education and not political agendas, which some could do it and some just couldn't. I always did because education was more important to me than political agendas. Now, I'm running for the legislature as a Democrat, so you can't say I haven't been fair to everyone concerned about it. But here's the thing. We are much too polarized in this state as well as the country in terms of political affiliation. Oftentimes our ballot will have 30, 35, or 40 candidates on it, and both parties want you to go out there and push that party button. I'm going to urge you not to do that because you're actually giving up your franchise to the party. You're giving a proxy to the party to make the vote for you, for all 40 of those candidates that you haven't chosen to study. So my recommendation is go down the list, get a copy of the early ballot, look at the candidates, and vote for the candidates and not the party.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. Our time for questions has now expired. I want to thank the audience for your questions and the candidates for your answers. Closing statements will now be made in reverse ballot order. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We'll begin with ballot position 2. Mr. Clayton.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank everyone for coming out tonight. When we first came into the room, we didn't know how many people would be here. I've been to forums with as many as several hundred. I've been to forums where I was there practically alone, except for the other candidates, so we just sat around and talked to one another. But it's always good to see the constituents in your area come out to hear you. I think it's important. I would like next time for all of you who are here, the next forum you go next door and get your neighbor. Have that neighbor go next door and get their neighbor. It's important that we take part in our political activities. It doesn't matter what office it is. Local politics often is the most important and affects you the most. The legislature certainly city council, school board. These kinds of elections make a huge difference to the tenor and temper of your community. And you folks have come out here tonight. Some of you wrote some terrific questions. In fact, all of you wrote some terrific questions. Did you have ghostwriters for this? Excellent questions, and I thank you for hearing me. I urge you to go out and vote. This is the third or fourth time that Linda and I have been together on a stage. I want to say this about her. She's a wonderful opponent and a wonderful candidate. We have a cordial campaign. You probably have sensed that. And I would like to think that all the other races in this area would be as cordial as ours.
Thank you.
Ms. Coop.
Let's see if I can pull this off of here for just a second. The most important person sitting in this room today is you, because you're the person that has the vote. You're the person that can make a difference in Austin. We're just conduits. As elected officials, and there's a lot of us in here, as a matter of fact, we'll probably all tell you the same thing, and George has been an elected official too. We're conduits, but the most important person in the room really is the constituent, the voter, because the voter is the person that has the power to change government. You know, when you're walking the district for as long as I have, and you hear what people have to say, you feel strangely empowered because you understand what their issues are, and you feel more confident in what you can go down and accomplish down at the State House because you know that you've talked to the voters. You know that they sort of, in a way, have your back because you've asked them what they want and what their concerns are. And like I said just a minute ago, we may not agree on everything, but I know that I'll always have my door open to you. I know I've given my cell phone number out to almost everybody in the district. I gave it out to almost everybody in my city council district. I want to hear from you. I want your vote because the most important person in this room today is you, the voter. I'm asking for your vote. Linda Coop, early voting starts on October the 20th, Richardson Civic Center. Fretz Park will not be open. It'll be at Churchill. So everybody that has voted at Fretz Park all these years is being renovated. So you'll have to go to Churchill Recreation Center. Those will be the two early voting areas in our district. And I want to thank you, Chris. You did a wonderful job. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and, of course, the RISD Council of PTAs.
Thank you, Ms. Coop. I just want to read this comment from an audience member because I happen to agree with it wholeheartedly. This person said, I just want to commend the two candidates for their civility in general and toward each other. So would you please join me in giving these candidates a round of applause for their participation?
Thank you.
Thank you, George. You're a gentleman.
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for moderating today. It's not an easy task, those of you who have been up here doing this. You did a great job. And thank you to both of our candidates, and thank you to all of you who came. We did have one more elected official sneak in after we started, so please welcome one of our trustees, Lynette Greenhaw. And as the president of the RISD Council of PTAs, we will be down in February to speak to all of our elected officials. So we hope that your voice will be with us. We are also a nonpartisan association and have membership open to all. If you're interested in joining any of our PTAs, please let me know. And thank you all for coming tonight.